Welcome, Jonathan Greenblatt, to another of our How conversations. Jonathan, it's a genuine pleasure. And I say this as your friend and as somebody that I know that you know that you know that I know that we are kindred, both in spirit and philosophically. We go back a long way.
Yeah.
And most recently, you became the CEO of the Anti-Defamation League. Everybody knows that the ADL is really about a righteous fight for elevating civil rights in society, explicitly fighting anti-Semitism, but equally promoting justice for all. You've been doing it valiantly. You've been doing it in a respectful yet outspoken way, which is part of the calling of what the CEO of the ADL signs up to do. And it's a pleasure and an honor to welcome you. And I want listeners and viewers to know that I'm welcoming you on the occasion of the publication, and I'll use the word I used before, of your significant book.
Thank you.
It could happen here. And the subtitle in and of itself says so much: Why America is Tipping from Hate to the Unthinkable and How We Can Stop It. To the extent your premise is right, which I think day in, day out, we get evidence that it is, stopping it becomes an urgent imperative. I really credit how data-driven you are, that you're promoting a set of values, but you're also responding to real data. We're, as Americans, leaning into a project, a grand human project, e pluribus unum. It's on every $1 bill, out of many one.
Yeah.
And it starts with we, the people. What is the state of we and our one? How much of a we is there right now based on data that you have? And how far are we from the one, the more perfect union?
Well, so I think there are a couple things. So first of all, let's just acknowledge that hate isn't a bug, it's a feature of the human condition.
Right.
It's in part of our humanity, if you will, since time immemorial. It's just simply true, like it or not. I think we're living in a particular time when we've had systems like social media, public figures like our prior president, some other current politicians, who have actually weaponized that hate, right, and used as a kind of currency to dominate. And that's not unique. Again, this also happens in the annals, and just today things are on a kind of steroids, and social media is part of that. So there have been a series of high-profile, frightening things that have people on edge. So attitudes may be going down, but instances have gone way up. And so that's part of the paradox of the moment we're in. And the trick is how do we bring this number of instances down to reflect the attitudes?
Yeah. And in that spirit, in your book, which I'm happy to hold up again because I think it's so important, you share a framework, and because you and I know that normative behavior needs normative frameworks. If we're going to go from organizing our affairs based on what we can and can't do to a world where we're doing what we should and should not do, we need normative frameworks that guide the should. The Potter Stewart adage, there's a difference between doing that which you have a right to do and that which is right to do. And you want normative action around hate, and you've developed a framework to make it actionable, and you have a pyramid of hate. Share that framework, because I think it could be instructive, if not useful.
Yeah, so the pyramid of hate is this kind of sociological construct that we've developed over the decades. Because at ADL, we advocate to try to create a more inclusive, environment where Jews and all minorities are protected. So whether we use the courts or Congress, we're pushing, or the court of public opinion advocacy. Right. Secondly, we work with law enforcement. We identify the extremists, whether they're online or offline. We try to thwart incidents before they happen. We help the police to arrest the people who commit these kinds of crimes. But ultimately, to win hearts and minds, you can't litigate or arrest. You've got to educate. And it's this notion that hate can, again, corrode and expand and mutate unless you stop it.
To fight hate, do you not fight it directly, but rather fight the indifference that enables it?
Well, look, at ADL, we balance between the theory and the practice.
Right.
So in theory, let's focus on the indifference. So that's kind of about the education. So we can we can kind of embed these values, if you will, in the next generation and curate more empathy, more understanding. But in practice, you know, the rabbi in Colleyville, in his first interview after he was saved or he survived, he said, I'm alive today because of training I got from the FBI, law enforcement, and the ADL. And literally every single day, last year, our analysts at ADL gave over 1,300 tips to law enforcement about extremists or potential crimes that were going to unfold against Jews or other minorities. So on the one hand, I can't afford not to deal with the evil.
So in the arena, you have to toggle between a direct intervention or assault on hate and the systems change of scaling values so that not just values, but the kind of courage so that we don't have the kind of indifference that perpetuates.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, there are some groups who just do, like there's a wonderful group called Facing History and Ourselves that just does education. It's amazing. Yeah. There's another group called the Secure Communities Network that just does defense, just does systems, just does like protecting things on the ground. ADL, we do both.
Yeah.
And we think that the toggling, as you described it, that balancing is appropriate. Right. So we're dealing with the here and now, and we're dealing with the long term as well. The education opportunity that I had on The View is as important as the training we did, you know, in synagogues in Dallas, Texas. Like they are two sides of the same coin, which is how do we protect our community and other marginalized groups?
So you mentioned Whoopi Goldberg, and I followed it closely, and I spent a lot of time trying to help purvey a framework of authentic apology. I once called for an apology ceasefire because apology has become performative. Everybody's apologizing, the confirmation bias sits in, and a true apology is always followed by making amends.
Right.
It's always followed by getting in touch with anybody that you might have victimized and asking them, how can I make it up to you in a meaningful way? It involves a moral audit of saying, what's come of me that I could have done this or said this in the first place? It involves a public commitment to behavioral change. You forgave Whoopi Goldberg publicly. What about her apology what made it sincere to you and meriting official forgiveness from the ADL so that we could just not fray or polarize even more?
So number one, I believe in this notion, and you were alluding to this earlier, that this phrase my friend Nick Cannon coined. We don't need cancel culture, we need counsel culture. Right. And I believe you bring people in should be your first instinct, not to push them out. So I think, and there's a Jewish value of tshuva, right? This notion of repentance. Like it's not my idea. It's been around for thousands of years, this notion that in our faith, we've all sinned, right? We've all made mistakes. And we need to, I think as humans, have the ability to recognize when people acknowledge their error and seek to do better.
And since the ADL is it's so central to the ADL to be an educator, and Aristotle taught that educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all. And what you're fighting, you know, as we know that only that which comes from the heart enters the heart.
Yeah.
How does the ADL, what are some of the pedagogical techniques that the ADL has to educate the heart?
I'll give you a couple ways. So number one, I think, as I mentioned before, our entire raison d'etre, like our pedagogy is, again, you know, this advocacy and this kind of investigation combined with kind of education, right? It's not either or, it's both and. Because we believe, again, you may have to advocate and stop the crimes, but you also got to touch hearts and minds, as you said. And I did not know that Aristotle phrase, but it's exactly right. Some of these guys in Silicon Valley, educated in the head, not in the heart. So number one, I think that's our raison d'etre, is we do both. Number two, we do a lot of interfaith and intergroup engagement work. The iftar, the seder, the worshiping together, breaking bread together, that stuff matters. I mean, social media has encouraged the kind of performative behavior, and we live in such a transactional society, but I think relational is the strongest kind of bonds that we can build.
What's your advice to people coming of age in terms of educational choices they make when they enter the workforce, for-profit, nonprofit. They're coming of age in a world that's fraught, in a post-pandemic world, in a world where the expression of hate has become more violent with incidents. What's your advice to a young person trying to make a life, trying to make a living, trying to build a career?
Like, I think you got to follow your heart. Like, I don't believe necessarily that there's a linear path to success, though that's valid. You could do that, because I just don't think the most interesting things happen not on the path. Like, think about Talmud for a minute. Like, think about our own Jewish faith. The most interesting things are not what's on the page. It's the commentary around what's on the page. And so I think in life, it's not just, you know, the path you're on, it's what happens off the path.
Truly being on an up and down journey and getting really good at zigging and zagging and going up and down, but always going forward towards true north. Being really good at being on a journey and not on a linear path, I think, is an important skill.
You know, something else I would say, actually, to that point about the zigging and the zagging, like, it's fun to talk to you, and I appreciate, again, your super generous introduction, but all my ventures haven't succeeded.
Right.
Like, I could think about one business I started that failed miserably. I could think about other setbacks I had in companies that I ran. And I say that because, you know, we laud success and we lionize like the winners. We often overlook, you know, when they lose. And so recognizing that the zigging, the zag means sometimes you're going to lose. You're going to misstep. You're going to fail.
Right. And finally, you know, this book could be daunting because it's inviting people to go into a world of negativity, a world that can depress and make us sad. And at the same time, there's such a hopeful message in here that we can stop hate. We can make the world better. What gives you hope? What's your greatest source of hope? I'd like to end on a hopeful note.
Well, I give you the macro and the micro. I mean, first of all, my greatest source of hope is America. Like, I am someone who believes in American exceptionalism. Like, this has been the greatest democracy in the history of humanity. I mean, what we have achieved, I mean, it is indeed an imperfect union, but that impulse, that design principle to seek a more perfect union is fundamental to this experiment, and it has been quite an experiment. And again, as you were saying earlier,
and that's what makes us great. Our greatness isn't, are we getting an A in the class? Our greatness is that we're taking the class.
That's right.
That we're in the project. And we're not great when we're leaning out of the project and having a food fight in Congress and at each other. But as long as we're showing up to that class to engage in the project, then we're great.
I have great hope, because what the American people have shown after global conflicts and civil war and economic tumult and civil strife, like we were saying a few minutes ago, this country always rebounds and comes back better. So I do believe that we have that capacity. And then the second gives me hope is I just look at my kids. They are more empathetic than I was. They are more global than I was. They are more smart. They're smarter and more strategic than I was. And so I think the next generation gives, again, it sounds really kind of cliche, but I look at my own children. When I see the world through their eyes, I feel enormous optimism.
Thank you for embracing this conversation. It's been a special one.
And for me as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan.